Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, robot, and loin streamer, and today is finally the long-awaited, probably not long-awaited, but the long-coming wrap-up of the His Name Was Augustin series. On this channel last year, I did 2 full book reviews for the first and the second book in the series. If you want to check those out, probably somewhat worth it to get an idea of what is in this book, but they just got crazier with every book. And that is one of the reasons why I need to discuss this. But before we get started, number 1, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number 2, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. Number 1 is Lemoy, where it is the monthly writing prompt on the channel where I give you guys a prompt. And then on the first, or you write a story, and then on the first Monday of the month, we just bask in your beautiful creative geniuses. Someday I will have the budget for an applause. It's true. And then number 2 is that the Fresh Meat feature, where if you are an indie author and you've got a book out there or coming out there, submit your first chapter down below and the cover image. I will read them on the channel to the best of my abilities, and hopefully it will help new readers find your content, because it is so easy to just consume a chapter and then be like, I need to know what happens next. Give it to me now. Here's the money. So those are the goals. Number 3, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite book retailers. And Plead More, Body More, the second book in the Body More trilogy, is coming out this October. Hope you are ready to cry. I hope it makes somebody cry more than me. I cried when I was editing it, okay? Meanwhile, I'm working on the third one, and I'm struggling, but I'm enjoying where it's going. But I'm also going to be glad when I'm done with the freaking first draft, because I am ready for Casey to throw hands. I'm ready to amp it the frick up and know what I'm doing, as opposed to whatever the mess is that it is right now. Okay, that's enough of that. Okay, so what is His Name Is Augustin? Because I've mentioned it, if you've been around the channel very much, I've mentioned it a couple of times in live streams and in discussions of craft and story talk. And there's just a lot to talk about when it comes to this book series. So His Name Is Augustin is it's called a paranormal romance. I don't think it quite falls in a paranormal romance, but I don't really know what to call it. And it stars a girl named Swanee. She's a German girl with elemental magic powers. She's a Teuton, and this magicalness is tied to her blood as a Teuton. And it's more or less about her discovering her heritage with the Teutons, because her father always hid the magic and the elemental stuff and the blood magic stuff from her, and she travels back in time and she gets to learn about the fall of her people, and then there's all this other stuff, and she falls in love with a demon-possessed dark priest man, and there are a lot of shenanigans throughout the 6 books. This is probably close to 1 million words, if not just short of 1 million words in all 6 books combined. So I'm going to detail for you kind of what the 6 books were-ish, and some thoughts. But before any of that, I highly recommend that you check out this book for yourself, see if you enjoy it, but more importantly, come back and talk to me about it, because the experiences that I've had with this book, I need people to talk to about it, because I need to double check what I think I read, as opposed to that's been the hardest thing, is I think I read this thing, the author's over here saying this thing, which is completely contrary to what it is my experience was, and I'm like, am I sitting over here crazy? What is this? So, there's that. And also, if you end up liking, a lot of these books are usually on sale, especially the first one is free. I think it's perma-free now. And if you end up liking this author, she has another book coming out in November. So I'm starting a new series within the same universe, so you'll have an evergreen author releasing books all the time. Okay, so if you want the full breakdown of what is book 1 and book 2 and what my critiques were for them, check out those reviews on the channel. But I'm still going to quickly detail what those books, what the stories of those books, or what happened in those books, for the purpose of understanding what the layout of this 6-book series is. I will likely give more detail to books 3 through 6, just because I think I have a better a better brief synopsis in here. and because I don't have other detailed things for the other 4 books. Okay, so the first book is basically a long prologue, where it starts out as Swanee is a little girl and her dad is throwing this party that she's not invited to because adults come and they get drunk and they get sexual, so she's banished to her bedroom. Yeah, it's weird on purpose. It's like, honey, why is her dad throwing a party when he's got like this 12, 13-year-old girl who's vulnerable, who he knows the adults at the party will hit on her, so she has to be locked in her bedroom, but she still sneaks out of her bedroom with her nanny's blessing. And in the hall, as she's watching the people down below dance with each other and get drunk, her father's assistant, Hans, approaches, and he's like, "What are you doing out here?" And then he invites her out back to the lake to swim, to dance, so that he can keep her away from them. Now, this is super creepy for a couple of reasons. Number one, Hans awakens Swanee's womanhood, elemental abilities out there, the ones that Swanee's father had been hiding from her all of these years. But then number two, this gets even creepier as you go further into the series and understand that Hans knew this was his future wife, but we're just gonna gloss over that for the moment. We learned that in book 5. So this man, 30 years older than Swanee, who is the assistant of her father, who knew her mother when her mother was pregnant with her, takes her outside. They swim, they dance by the river, by the lake, whatever, igniting both of their elemental abilities while they dance. And then this sets off Swanee's learning of the Teutonic people and her Teutonic heritage that her father lied to her about. Now, the whole rest of the book has to do, the thing to really know about this series is that it feels like a travelogue most of the time, and it's very meandering and kind of things are just slowly happening, but something is not really happening, and then all of a sudden there's like a what the frick. So there's Swanee bugs her father about the Teutonic background. She then starts attending Teutonic school, where she starts learning about her Teutonic background and the history of the Teutons, and about this time stone that got lost at some point that allows you to travel back in time. And she goes on a concert vacation with some of her girlfriends. She comes back, she talks to her father about how some of her girlfriends talked about wanting to bang him, and how they've agreed that he's not allowed to bang her friends. Again, with the like weird casual sexualness, she gets a dildo from one of those friends at some point. She eventually, we go through some years of her going from 13 to 18, where she's now going to college in the United States, where her cousin Beth lives, and she meets Joel, who is Beth's boyfriend. And then when she's on a vacation, one of these times, I think it was when she was with her friends at the concert thing, she was guided to like this cliff where she found the time, she was guided to this cliff by a magical fairy, and that's where she found the time stone. And then she took the time stone with her and started learning about the time stone because she wanted to use it to go back in time to see what caused the fall of the Teutonic people, because the entire society was pretty much destroyed except for those that went into hiding, and they're still in hiding. And so Swanee is simultaneously doing this while also going to school in the United States. And then we have years passing where she's also coming back to Germany to be with her family during the holidays. And her dad is still throwing weird sex parties where she dresses up in Lolita clothing to try to scare off the older men so they don't hit on her. Yeah, that's still apparently going on, but it's still so casual that her dad is like, meh. And then back at college, some guys get into her dorm room and randomly anally rape her for no apparent reason. It just happens, and one of them steals the time stone, but then they don't do anything with it because she immediately comes back out and uses her ice abilities to turn into basically an ice ghost and pushes one out a window. And then she flies back to... Oh, and then her dad like castrates and rapes somebody as well to get them back for raping his daughter. That's my headcanon, but it does suggest that he did something to that guy. I just took it the step further because it makes sense for the situation of the book. Anyway, then by the end of the book, Swanee has returned to Germany with her cousin Beth, and her cousin's boyfriend, Joel. And Beth knows about the Teutonic magic because Beth also has Teutonic blood, just not enough for Beth to have the abilities. Her blood magic is, her blood's a little too low for the blood magic. But so Beth is her best friend, and so she tells Beth, hey, I've got this time stone, I'm gonna travel back into medieval Germany, do you wanna come? And she's like, yes. And so then they also determine they're gonna bring Joel for no apparent reason, because he knows like level 1 German and he can shoot a bow and arrow. And so they decide, well, let's bring him. Let's not tell him what we're going to do, but we're going to bring him with us. And so then at the end of book 1, they travel back in time. So long story short, all that really happens in the whole like 400 pages of book 1 is Swanee learns about the Teutons existing and then finds the time stone and then travels back in time. There's really no conflict there. It is just sort of the, and that's why there's really no conflict throughout it, and that's what makes it feel more like a prologue, because it's just setting up the ability for her to go back in time, and we only meet her loved one, her ultimate lover, starting in book 2. So yeah. Book 2 is the start of Swanee's medieval adventures and covers about 2 years of her life. Oh, one of the things to note is that when they travel back in time, number 1, you are not at risk of dying. If you actually die in the past, it's basically like dying in a video game, and you just go back to where you initially traveled from in the future. That becomes a problem in the story for a couple of reasons. I may or may not get into it. But so you don't actually die if you die in the past. Once they travel back in time and reach this back in time, they immediately are, the 3 of them, are immediately approached by enemy individuals that end up killing Beth and sending her forward in time. So then it's just Swanee and Joel. And instead of going back to present day to grab Beth and then return, they decide that they are going to just remain here and live here and go through what Swanee initially wanted to come for. Now, Swanee wanted to come to see the fall of her people, but accidentally, since they didn't tell Joel what they were trying to do and just vaguely told him to think of the Middle Ages to teleport, they teleported back too far by like 30 or 40 years. So we're in like the 1020s, and they travel through the Germany in this time, get to Munich, where Swanee is able to be admitted into the Teutonic Society because of her Teutonic blood. There's no problem there. And she meets the dark priest slash executioner, title man Augustin. So from here, Swanee starts spending all of her time with Augustin, learning about dark magic and trading information. Meanwhile, Augustin is pretty much outcasted from the royal family. He was supposed to be the inheritor of the throne, but he rejected it, and then he was seen as demonic, and so he got cast out and had to change his name, and nobody associates with him. But so there's that. He is a gambler. He hires prostitutes. He murders women, children, and animals and has sex with them to sacrifice them to the deity that has given him powers, like all of this stuff. And Swanee is spending all of this time with him, like learning languages and dark magic and blood magic from him, while he is learning things from her, because all he apparently wants, all this terrible dark priest wants, is to learn standard American English. So that happens. All of the while, Joel is falling in love with Swanee over these 2 years because he can barely communicate with anybody, and Swanee is the only person that he knows. At the end of book 2, Swanee and Joel do a blood transfer in order to, well, number 1, Joel has to get the blood transfer to become a Teuton so he can have the Teutonic magic and then marry Swanee. And Swanee does the blood transfer for one of her female friends that she's made back in time so that that female friend can become a Teuton and then marry the man of her dreams. And Augustin uses his connection to the demon to make sure that death does not take them, because the blood magic transfer thing has a high mortality rate. And then Augustin is cursed by the king slash Prince Otto for using that dark magic, and he gets cast out of the village. Not only because Swanee is actually in love with Augustin, but also because they'd done some sort of ritual that gave Swanee's heart to Augustin, the Teutonic ritual that's like, he literally has her heart in his pocket and he just takes it out and strokes it every now and then and like fingers it, and as you could imagine. It also turns out like the one time that Swanee and Augustin had sex, she got pregnant with his baby, and that was right before he was cast out of the village. And so then she marries Joel, and she's going to pretend that that baby belongs to Joel, but then the demon creature makes her miscarry Augustin's baby because he's a demon and he's an asshole. What would you expect? So book 3 is a continuation of the medieval times that will now be a montage of 15 to 20 years through Swanee's life, where she's giving birth. She resents Joel for having children with her. Joel is so in love with her and is just taking care of her estate and her money and making sure that her and the children have a place to stay, and he thinks that she's in love with him because she never complains, but she resents him the whole time, and she resents their children too. Oh my gosh. And she names freaking one of their children. Tell me, is this cold? She names one of their children Beth, and that is the child that comes out and like immediately dies. I feel like I need to say it here because I might forget later that Swanee technically kills Beth 3 times in this series. So there's right here, or well, there's at the beginning of book 2 where they travel back in time and she gets stabbed and immediately dies. Then there's her naming her immediate death child Beth. And then in book 5, Beth dies in real life. Tell me that there's not like some kind of less than secret resentment, hatred toward Beth, because she also gets mad at Beth for being anal into having abilities. Like, we'll get there, bro. We will get there, freaking A. So during this book, Swanee learns about Augustin raping women, children, and animals for sacrifice for the demonic deity Wotan. At least 12 individuals are killed every year for Wotan, and probably more, and halfway through the book, Swanee sneaks away from her hard-working husband, whom she despises, to meet Augustin under the guise of visiting the hometown of her friend. Here, Augustin beats her, rapes her, mutilates her, breaks her feet so she can't play the organ, causes her to have a miscarriage by how hard he beats her pregnant body, and rapes her again. Swanee returns to her husband, doesn't tell her any of this happens, actually lies that Augustin did anything to her and says that it was some rando, and so then her husband starts going on a search for the man that hurt his wife because he cares about her. Can't find anyone because she obviously made somebody up, and eventually Joel goes off to war because the Teutonic people are under attack for, you know, the ultimate fall of their people, and since he is military aged and able, he fights for them. He dies of dysentery out there, and Swanee meets up again with Augustin, and while their village has been mostly fled, Swanee stayed behind, obviously, because she wanted to see the fall of her people, and Augustin came and met her in this almost completely deserted village that's under attack. The two of them rush while under siege. They rush to get married so that they can have sex on Augustin's mother's grave / altar, because she's got an altar in like the church. They have sex on that, while Freya, the best friend, also apparently stayed behind so that her kids can just live without their mother, because she's like, well, I would rather die Swanee's friend than live without Swanee. Apparently her children and the husband that she loved so much, she got a very dangerous blood transfer magic thing. That they don't matter anymore. It's all about Swanee. So they have sex on this thing, and then as they're getting attacked, Swanee plays her time travel magic song and goes forward in time. I'm not entirely sure why, because she could have been stabbed and killed at that exact moment and then still gone forward in time. But she decided she needed to play the song of time and travel forward, and she took her medieval friend with her into modern era, or I guess the year 2000. Where cousin Beth is mad at Swanee because she stayed in the medieval times without her and banged her boyfriend. Like, Beth and Joel were Christian. They were waiting until marriage to have sex, and still Swanee, the freaking Swanee, manipulated Joel into being her boyfriend, married him, hated him the whole time, took his virginity, and took him from Beth. They spent 20 years married, and she's like, it's not going to affect their relationship at all. She doesn't even reflect on how this hurts Beth at all, ever. Actually, even the conclusion of the situation with Beth and Joel ends up with just Swanee getting Beth to hate Joel, and they both mock him for being bad in bed. Nothing to do with how Swanee stole her boyfriend. Freaking this whole situation with Joel makes me so upset you don't even know. I need other people to read this to be like, do you see something that I don't see that says like Joel deserved this crap? Because Joel did not deserve this crap. It feels like the author hates Joel. So Beth hates Swanee. Swanee hates Joel. Joel has PTSD and wants to talk to his wife of 20 years, Swanee, but she hates him, despises him, won't even talk to him, and when she sees him crying in the hallway, she's like, go away. And now, since Beth isn't talking to her, she replaces Beth as her best friend with her friend from medieval times that she brought forward with her. That friend's name is Freya. Eventually, Swanee does have to send Freya back, and she becomes friends with Erica, who is a lesbian. This is the same person that has had a crush on Swanee since book 1. This is the same person that had a crush on Swanee in book 1 and gave her a vibrator for her birthday, and then another vibrator. This person has given her 2 vibrators, but she's in a relationship now. But still, it's fine. It's fine. It really doesn't matter, because as soon as Swanee makes up with Beth, Erica disappears again. She doesn't matter. Swanee just needs like a number 1 girl. So on top of all of that, we've got more montages of moving between schools and festivals and the family, while Swanee also becomes super empowered and uses her ghostly ice abilities, her ice form that she has from her Teutonic powers, to hunt down Teutonic men that are abusing her friends and threatening this one guy until he stops abusing her friend. Swanee now ascends to this position of Lady Munich, and it's never really described, but it's basically like the female overseer of the city. So, and there's some sort of lore here where every city gets a man and a woman, and the man of the city is called the keyholder, and the woman is called Lady whatever the city is called. And technically, they're partners. Technically, they get married, but they don't have to. Technically, they can have children, but they don't have to. But like in this book, it starts saying they have to have children, whereas, you know, the keyholder that had a previous lady did not have children with that lady. I don't really know how it works. Anyway, so just know that there are 2 of them. There's the man and the woman that are the overseers of the city, and Swanee has now become the keeper lady of Munich. So, since she is the Lady of Munich, she wants to know who the keyholder is, but she has no idea who the keyholder is, and nobody is telling her who the keyholder is. So, since she's betrothed to him, she really wants to know who it is, and so she spends a portion of this book trying to determine who in the community is her fated betrothed. Eventually, it turns out that, you guessed it, her fated betrothed is her dad's assistant, her childhood crush, a man 30 years her senior, the one that took her by the water to dance when she was 13, Hans. Also during this time, Swanee's heart still belongs to Augustin because he never actually died. He comes through time using the time warp abilities, and he and Swanee have sex while he looks like a corpse, because though he is immortal, he still has a mortal body. So going 1,000 years into the future did to his body what you would expect. It did not slow Swanee down at all, though. He did have a flawless cock. That's the important part. While Augustin is visiting this time period, Swanee also takes his corporeal form on a date where she like puts him in a robe and then puts a bunch of Hans's cologne all over him to hide the smell of his rotting stink so that nobody will notice that she's walking around with a corpse. Yeah, so she just wanted like a last day out, a last hurrah, and like a last couple of hours of having sex with this man before she and he canceled the heart bond so that she could get her heart back so that she could marry Hans, as she's required by tradition. And during the time of all of this happening, we also learn that Beth, who is Swanee's cousin, is now dating Swanee's father. So we get some uncle/niece dating going on, and Swanee's only concern is that her father is treating Beth correctly, and she even asks if she needs to talk to her dad about the way that he pleases her in bed. There are like a lot of like really weird sexual relationship things in here that are very casual, and I'm confused by them. It's one of the reasons I need a support group to read this and help me. Please help me. It's Guys, it's been a year. Somebody please help me. So we're 4 books out into a 6-book series, and at this point, I still don't know what the driving force of this book is. It started out with Swanee learning about her secret society that she's a part of and her secret bloodline, and then she wanted to see the fall of her people, but 4 books into this, like more than 500,000 words probably, she doesn't have a goal. Like, she's not trying to accomplish anything. She's not fighting an evil. She's not going against anything. She's not trying to solve anything. She just is kind of existing. So going into book 5, it takes place after Swanee and Hans have gotten married. Technically, it starts off with them getting married, and also Swanee ascends to the leadership role of Lady Munich while shrugging off the traditions of old, while showing the Teuton elders that she's going to bring feminism to their culture. The way she does this is she goes to their official meeting, the first official meeting that she goes to. They're all in their traditional robes in the middle of the forest, as you kind of do, and she just comes in a crop top and hot pants to be like, so, guys, we're gonna do things my way. We're gonna respect women. I'm going to teach children to love women, unlike you people. And if you disagree with the teaching that I want to give your children, my dad is going to get you all fired and you're going to be poor. That is what happens. She's like, she can do this because her dad is connected as frick. Also, while even walking down the aisle at her own wedding to marry Hans, she can't stop thinking about her ex-lover Augustin. So even before marriage, she's already cheating again on her next husband forever. She even screams at her husband while she's pregnant that she prefers the demon priest rapist over him. Continually, Swanee rejects to allow any parents or elders to view her lesson plans for the children because she must teach the children her morality in private with no oversight from those she believes will disagree with her. So she literally judges everyone who doesn't agree with her as being so morally inferior to her that they should never be heard. Yeah, she doesn't want... She's the arbiter and determiner of everything that the next generation hears with nobody else's input. She also uses her husband, whom she constantly insults, as muscle to force people out of her, to force people away from where she's training their children. Also, surprisingly, this totally backwards patriarchal society that once women enslaved apparently is still fine with legally marrying a couple of lesbians despite how gay marriage was still illegal in Germany at the time that this book is set in. That's backtracking. Swanee has to bring feminism to this because men casually abuse women apparently in this Teutonic situation. That's why she was hunting down certain people and threatening them, and we're supposed to understand that this is a sexist society, this is a sexist culture, and yet they have no problem marrying officially a couple of lesbians, despite it being illegal in the culture of Germany at the time of this book. But the Teutons are totally on for it. They just like beating women if they're married to a man. This does not count though. I don't really know. That was kind of confusing. Sometimes it just didn't feel like the culture of this whole thing was really thought out to describe how the Teutons were different than regular culture, and sometimes it was just throwing in buzzwords of certain things to be like, oh, this culture is evil and Swanee is the savior that's going to change it by bringing progressive values in. But then none of it really made sense because the good characters were not allowed to be anything but good or acknowledged as good, because Swanee definitely did some bad things, but she was still heralded as a heroine. Anyway, and there was no pushback on Erica and her girlfriend getting married, but there was a lot of pushback on Swanee teaching children and bringing feminism to the children. I think it has more to do with Swanee being absolutely abrasive and destructive to all cultural traditions and having zero respect for the culture in which she was infiltrating and given the responsibility to be the leader of on the feminine side. But that wasn't really addressed anywhere in the novel, like between characters addressing Swanee. Nobody ever challenged Swanee on her stomping on traditions, on her stomping on other people, on her using people. Nobody even confronted her on well, her dad at one point confronted her on cheating, and I think he called her a name. I can't remember. Also, Joel at some point said, I'm done with you, and great job for Joel. He deserves better than freaking Swanee. Also to note, Cousin Beth, who marries Swanee's father, goes with him during honeymoon to a dark priest and is put under anesthesia for 2 weeks while the guy has anal sex with her for days to give her magical powers, just so that Beth and her uncle can get married and have sex, because Swanee's father's ability is so powerful that if he has sex with a non-magical Teuton, it's likely that they are going to die because of the strength of his abilities. The other thing is, so I don't think I mentioned this before, except for in my book review for book 1, but there are 2 ways in which you can get Teuton abilities if you have Teuton blood. Number 1 is you can do the blood ritual, which I mentioned Swanee did in book 2 with her friend Freya, and Joel did in book 2 with the guy that eventually married Freya. And that is a specific magical ritual that basically takes the guts out of both of them, mashes those guts together, and then that creates Teutonic blood in the non-Teuton. That's one way to get Teuton abilities. The second way to get Teuton abilities is to have anal sex consistently with a Teuton of higher blood purity, and eventually your blood magic will go up. There's no saying how long it takes, there's no saying how much you have to do, there's no saying saying if you have to be in or out for it to work, if you know what I mean. Like in finishing. But somehow anal sex specifically raises the Teuton blood quantum. And so Beth gets married to her uncle and then immediately has anal sex while knocked out for 2 weeks so she can get blood magic. And Swanee is just pissed that she's not the special one anymore. She actually gets pissed at Beth for coming back with magical powers because she's not the special one out of the two of them anymore. And the whole time, even in book 1, Beth freaking hated her parents because her dad married for love instead of magic. And she's like, I wanted cool magical powers. I could have had cool magical powers if my dad wasn't selfish and didn't marry for love. Do you see why I need somebody else to like read this so that we can talk about it? Anyway, secondarily, considering that in book 1, when Swanee was 13, Hans took her aside to teach her the secret of the Teutons and married her less than 10 years later. Now you've got Swanee's dad marrying Swanee's cousin and bringing her into the fold. This looks a lot like grooming. So as Hans gets older, he starts dying. He's got brain cancer. Shortly after Beth and Swanee's dad come back from the honeymoon, people around Swanee start dying. This starts with Beth and Swanee's dad when they go off on a cruise. Should be noted that this is the 3rd time in the series that the author has killed a Beth. And it seems personal at this point. As the story progresses, more people around her die, dropping like flies, but none of them really matter because they're brief, the cast is so large, they're all side characters, and Swanee barely cries, if at all, for any of them. One of the people to eventually be targeted is Swanee's daughter, who's kidnapped by what appears to be a group of Saxons trying to get the time stone that Swanee stupidly had surgically put into her hip so nobody could steal it from her. Rather than getting rid of it in the first place, like hiding it in the ocean or just disposing of it somehow, she wanted to keep it on her and have absolute power because nobody else is allowed to have any abilities stronger than Swanee. Eventually, this results in Swanee being sent a videotape of her daughter being raped and a box of her daughter's body parts all cut up because after they raped her, they killed her. And, because Swanee is the best mother in the entire world, she has exposed her 13 to 14-year-old son to all of this, including the brutal videotape of his sister being raped, including her body parts, and also she left her daughter in the custody of her son when they went to school and said, make sure nothing happens to her. So now, of course, her son Max takes it as a personal responsibility and a personal failure that his sister was abducted. Also, while Hans, Swanee's husband, is dying, Swanee constantly talks to her son, and Hans's son, about her true lover, Augustin, and fills his mind with thoughts and stories of Augustin, and even gets a picture of Augustin painted that she puts on the wall in her house so that they can all look at him and admire him. She puts that picture over her marital bed. We can't forget that Swanee keeps also calling upon the name of God and saying she's a good Christian woman that is saving Augustin through all of this. So there is also that. So this will become important later as Swanee basically grooms her son into being her true lover. That is not a joke. Apparently seeing nothing wrong in the way that she's treated her child like a spouse and confidant while her husband is dying. I get that she's going through a lot emotionally and she needs somebody to lean on and to express herself to. But your 14-year-old son is not an appropriate outlet for your, but your 14-year-old son is not an appropriate replacement for your dying husband. You should not be sharing the the brutal crime scene of your daughter with your 14-year-old son. You should not be sharing a bunch of stories about your ex-lover and his heroism and how great he was in the sack with your 14-year-old son. You should not be telling your 14-year-old son that your ex-lover who raped you was better than his father. And you should not be crying on him and putting all of your emotional baggage on him because you need emotional support, and you apparently don't have any adult friends because they're all dead. Swanee, they're all dead because of you. Let's be honest. They're all dead because of you. So Swanee's life is so messed up at this point that all she wants to do is escape back to the 1000s era so that she can live the rest of her life with Augustin. Now, let me clarify. Swanee didn't just ruin her life, but she ruined the life of every last person who was murdered to get to her, including Joel's entire family, even though he hadn't spoken to her in 30 years. He still suffered for her selfishness, for when she took him back in time at the beginning of the first book, and he never asked for it, and she never told him that it was happening, but his life was still ruined because she involved him. So her son, at 16, determines to give his soul to the same demon that Augustin serves in order to have the abilities to gain those special demonic abilities to get revenge on the people that killed his sister. Now, once you do this ritual, you kind of get cast out of history, you get cast out of your family, and you have to choose a new name. In book 2, when this happened to Augustin, he chose the name Wolfgang, and in this book, when Max does it, you know what name he chooses? It's Augustin. I told you that he was being groomed to become her lover. It's Augustin, and he even looks like Augustin after the ritual. He's got the long black hair, he's got the descriptions, he ages up from looking 16 to looking like she imagined or remembered Augustin looking like. Additionally, after Hans dies, her son Max also becomes the key holder because the key has to be passed on, the key holder role has to be passed on at death. And so Hans and Max set it up so that the key holder position will go to Max, and as you know, the key holder is betrothed and magically drawn to, magically fated to the lady. So not only does Max look like Swanee's ex-lover, but now he is also the key holder, and there is awkward sexual tension between Swanee and her son, who looks like her ex-lover, who is now her city betrothed. And this was set up by freaking Max's father. I don't think I thought of it that way before, but freaking Max's own father set him up to be in an incestuous relationship with his mother. Can somebody give me is there a different read on this situation? Also, let me just say that there was more sexual tension between Max and Swanee than there ever was between Hans and Swanee. So that's weird. I should also add that grooming just seems to be a normal part of this book and this society, considering Hans, on his deathbed, admitted that he was in love with and seeing Swanee's mother. However, when he became the key holder, he knew that he couldn't be with her. And so Swanee's mother started dating Swanee's father, but Swanee also told Hans while she was pregnant with Swanee that Swanee was destined to become his Lady Munich because Swanee traveled back in time and met her mother, and her mother learned all of this stuff from current year Swanee, who talked to her about it. And so Swanee told Hans, this is your future wife. And so all of this time, over the 20 years that Hans was working alongside Swanee's father, he knew and taking care, assisting in taking care of Swanee. When Swanee's mother was still alive for a couple of years before she died, they knew that her daughter was betrothed to Hans. So that makes the dancing scene and so much more in that first book so much more sus to me. Like, again, I need somebody else to read this book and put these things together and tell me what they see, because I just see not good things, and I'm not sure how I'm supposed to be rooting for any of these characters for any good things to happen. But that's also what confuses me, is like looking at the perspective of the author on this book versus like what I'm experiencing and what I'm supposed to feel about any of this and what I'm supposed to be picking up. And I'm like, I really want to know what the intention was versus what I'm getting, because it's very strange, the disconnect that I feel. Anyway, moving on. At the end of the book, Joel shows up at Swanee's house in Germany to tell her that his entire family is dead, his family business has been destroyed by these Saxon guys, and he's suicidal because he's lost literally everything. The only things he's ever wanted in life, the only things he ever loved was being a father, was having a family. Even back in the medieval times when he loved his children. He loved working for his children, he loved being a husband, he loved being a father, and that is all that he wanted out of life. He even said that once they came forward in time again, and he was just like, I'm finishing college, I'm starting a business, I'm getting a wife, I'm having kids, and I love my big family. That is all he ever wanted, and it was taken away from him by Swanee, who freaking hates her children and shat on her children every chance that she got. Now, since he's alone, he doesn't know what to do, so he came to say that he's going to kill himself. He also says he doesn't even hate her for what has happened to him, he's just miserable. He wants to see his family again, he always just wanted a family, and as he learns that Swanee is going to go back in time, he says he wants to see his back in time family one more time, and then he'll kill himself. The fact that he doesn't blame Swanee at all for all the bad things that befell him, even though it has entirely to do with the Saxons because of her taking him back in time, and then she never even tried to warn him that this was happening when people around her were dropping like flies, it shows just how good of a guy he is, because everything in his life that has gone wrong is entirely her fault, related to the cult that she did not warn anybody about. I should also note that while they were still finishing up college, and after Swanee destroyed Joel's relationship with Beth and made Beth hate him, she tried to break up Joel's new relationship with the new girl that he fell in love with, and was shit-talking him while they were standing in line for like graduation and just passing in the hall, is she would try to ruin his relationship with the new girl, even though Joel didn't contact them. She just got so offended that Joel didn't want anything to do with the Teutons once they came back, and he's like, I just want to live a normal life. I didn't ask for any of this. Can I just get on with my life? And then, Swanee said, I don't want anything to do with you. And so just Joel went on his merry way, found a new girl, was living his life, and Swanee kept trying to ruin it. Like, she could not move on, even though she was the one that said, I want nothing to do with you. So I just have to highlight how poorly Swanee treated Joel for literally doing nothing. But she holds it against him that he didn't satisfy her in bed for the 20 years they were married, when she pretended to have an orgasm the whole time and pretended that she was fine. But then she held it against him that he didn't know when she told him everything was fine. It's so frustrating. Joel deserved so much better than this crap, you guys. Okay, so the book 5 ends with the two of them in the backyard getting ready to go back in time to the 50s. Yeah. As they get back in time, Joel is very certain that he is going to kill himself, but first he wants to check on all of his children that are still alive in that time period, and his heart is warmed by how well they're all doing, and he is so proud. He is so insanely proud of all of his children there that it also doesn't make any sense that he would still be like, I'm just gonna kill myself. Like, he could just go and be involved with his children. Half of this book is spent with Swanee not being married to Augustin, who she went back in time to be with, but instead she's fighting or fighting evil or anything, but she forces Augustin to marry her to his brother, whom she's hated since book 2. For no apparent reason. It feels like this curse came out of nowhere that says, okay, now you need to marry me to him. And also, randomly there's a curse that they have to break or something because Munich is cursed, and also somehow Augustin the scholar doesn't realize that he's doing a youth spell on Swanee so that she can marry Otto while she looks young, but that youth spell is only going to make her look young for 2 weeks, and they're tapping into the abilities of a demon who is going to take her soul after those 2 weeks are over. But apparently looking young forever again is worth it because she looks like 40 now, and so they make her 20 again. Kind of a big oversight for Augustin the scholar, but okay. Swanee's excessively horny in this book and spends most of her 11 days with Otto, banging him out in the woods and hiding until she ultimately suicides with him in the Rhine River. Augustin becomes the new key holder after Otto dies and saves her from death, and now his bride is young again as well. The 4th time her virginity has been given back to her. It should also be noted that at some point in this novel, Swanee had 3 living husbands out of 4 husbands, and she not once had a partner that she did not cheat on. But that's something that bothers me specifically, especially as, you espouse being some kind of godly woman, saving someone else's corrupted soul from hell as his lover. Anyways, the rest of this novel has to do with Swanee and Augustin going to hell together, interrupting an orgy among demons to break a curse, and traveling back in time to meet Augustin's mother and speak to her one last time to introduce Swanee to her. The two of them then are in a tower in their new home that they'll be living in for the next 3 millennia at least, and Swanee is completing the tomes of her book and putting together her final thoughts of what she learned from life and the lessons that she wants to pass on to her son, who is living now as, you know, the cursed one. Which was the whole reason for her writing these 6 books, because there's a prologue at the beginning of each of them, with it acting as if Swanee is detailing the history of her life because it's important for her history to be known as it's part of the Teutonics' history and heritage. At the end of everything, the message she comes up with for her son out of all of this stuff that's happened is, I've got nothing. I've got nothing to tell my son that he can learn from this situation. So Augustin says, tell him to start a metal band, and Swanee is like, that's right, let's do that. And that's the end of the book. So these are just a couple of random thoughts that I had specifically from the last couple of books, since I didn't do full book reviews on them. Number 1, what was the point of the domestic violence shelter that Swanee started in book 5? It felt like I didn't mention it in the plot summary because it didn't really matter at all. It was just kind of here and there. Oh, Swanee built this thing, and then she she more or less funded it, and then she passed it on to somebody else. It didn't really matter. It was just like, it felt like it was there to make Swanee look better because it didn't do anything. It had no impact on the plot. It was just a random thing that was thrown in for Swanee to do, and it was a meaningless name dropping that changed absolutely nothing. These books felt rushed outlines where certain things weren't explored when they could have been. Another thing was, one of my biggest problems, it was that the characters embraced the demonic powers while calling upon God, like it would save them if they willingly embraced the demonic entities and the demonic abilities. If you willingly embrace the demons, typically you can't have the help of God because you're dipping into hell. And you're saying, I'm taking your thing. You can't swindle a demon for power by saying, I believe in God, but also, I embrace you. Also, Swanee did not have, the godly... we'd never talked about all of the grooming culture that was in Teutons, and instead we just talk about feminism, while she, literally perpetrated grooming children, grooming her own son into being with her. They did kiss. They did not have sex. They did kiss, and there was a part where she was like, I need to go back in time, but before I accidentally sleep with my son. That was in the text. That was part of her urgency for jumping back in time as quickly as she did after he ascended to Keyholder. She was like, oh, I feel this sexual drive towards my child. I need to get out of here. Why would her husband do... Maybe her husband knew everything that Swanee had done to him all of this time, including freaking telling her son that her ex-boyfriend was better than him. And so then he was like, oh yeah, fuck you, bitch. This is my last thing. But Hans isn't presented as being that dubious in that way. It was really weird. Swanee was literally arguing with their 1070s friends to stop caring that Joel wanted to kill himself. Oh my gosh. So they told Heinrich and Freya that Joel wanted to kill himself. He was so depressed he lost his family. And so Heinrich and Freya and some of their other friends from back in time really cared about Joel. And so they were trying to figure out ways of helping him and convincing him to not kill himself and that life was worth it. And Swanee continuously argued with them, telling them to shut up. If he wants to kill himself, then he should. This is the heroine in the last book of the series, where she is supposed to be it's called Whatever Fortune, where she's supposed to be benefiting from having suffered in the last book, and it's just you're a bitch. I don't want you to get anything. The cruelty this author showed towards Joel felt obsessive. Bro, it was so over the top the whole time. I don't understand why she hated Joel. Though that is just my supposition. There was a lot of hatred for Joel in the narrative. I don't know if the author actually hated Joel, but bro, the narration hated Joel. Even to the point where you send him off to war, You forcefully bring him back with the intention of going to see your society fall. You bring back a military-aged man without telling him you're going to a war zone. He gets drafted for this war that is for people that are not his own, and then you just kill him with dysentery. Like, everything is done to try to humiliate or denigrate Joel, and it's just, he's still a good sport in the end. Like, bro. Joel is the true hero of this book. Anyway. You can't claim to be a good Christian girl who evokes the power of God against evil when you say that you will shun God for your demonic lover. That also happens. Swanee literally does everything for herself, to herself, then sobs that things she asked for are happening to her. She also can't get over Joel, and I'm pretty sure at this point, at the end of the book, I'm pretty sure that Joel was the best thing ever to happen to her, including the best sex she's ever had and the best guy to ever care about her. She realizes how bad she messed up, and so she shits on him any chance that she gets to make herself feel better about wrecking the best thing that ever happened to her. Otto's random marriage and sexing each other in book 6 was bizarre, especially considering Swanee came back in time specifically to be with Augustin. And I get that Otto was the key holder, so she was going to have the draw to him as well. But also, she completely seemed to lose any level of consciousness and control, where she didn't have that in book 3 or 4, when she was already the key holder in both of those as well. So, like, or the Lady Munich in those as well. So there was, like, some lore changing that happened in a very big way between books 3 and 4 that didn't make sense in comparison with how rules were presented in the earlier books. This is not a critique of the book specifically, but I think there is a major disservice in this not being marketed as reverse harem, because obviously Swanee had 3 husbands at one point. 3 living husbands at one point. Even if she wasn't sleeping with Joel, you still had Joel, Hans, and Augustin alive at the same time. And then you had Joel, Hans, and Otto. No, Joel, Augustin, and Otto. For me, there were a lot of really weird sexual vibes throughout the book, but it got aggressively more sexual after one point, which it felt like was when the author was included in a smut anthology partway through, I think it was last year. And it's a little funny that the second half of the series got so much more sexual after kind of that point in what felt like her career. But also, Swanee was way more horny starting at book 3. And in all reality, the prologue of this book, this series that is in the beginning of every book, was presented as Swanee writing this for her son, and I think to inform him of the history of the Teuton people that is not written down. And I think this framing of the books hurt the author in 2 different ways. Number 1, all of the detailed sex scenes in here and talking romantically about cheating on Max's father and how much better Augustin was than Max's father doesn't really work and is disgusting at worst. If you're preparing this for your son as a historical document, you don't need to tell him in detail about your anal rape when you were 18 years old. You don't need to tell him about the detailed sex that you had with people who were not your husband at various times. Because it's not important to the history of your people to pass that on, especially when you get to the end and you're like, I don't have anything to tell him that I learned from any of it. Like, you didn't learn anything from the way that you cheated on Joel. You didn't learn anything about keeping a secret about, with the superpowers of that time stone. You didn't learn anything about going to hell and breaking curses. You didn't learn anything about bringing a sinner back for redemption. Like, all of this, you didn't learn anything from literally living 4 lifetimes. It boggles my mind. The second way that this didn't work, or the second way that this worked against the author, is that if she started it out, like, she's got this grand manifesto idea of what she needed to tell her son and the lessons that she learned that he would get nowhere else and why this history was so important, when she got to the end and said, I don't know what to tell him, you just invalidated the prologue at the very beginning where you were saying, this is so important for my son to know, I need him to know these life lessons. I think that's a problem of this having maybe been something not fully written and actually just written out as she went. So then when it got to the end of the book, things changed. And there was a rush to get the stuff out on a certain timeline instead of polishing the story to connect the pieces and make it make sense. But again, taking out those prologues would have changed the framing of the entire series and cleared up at least some of these oddities that just dirtied the experience in a couple of ways. And the last thing that I want to say on this is that if Swanee is actually a villain who thinks that she's justified and a good person and doesn't see what's wrong with her, like from her perspective, this series makes a lot more sense in general. But that's one of my problems, is I don't know what the proposed perspective is. I don't have anybody to talk to about this book, and as far as I can tell, this is supposed to be a hero's journey because it ends with a happy ending where Swanee gets everything that she wants and she never suffers and she's all powerful and she's the righteous one because everybody else is sexist and racist and blah, blah, blah. But Swanee is also racist. It just never actually tells you that she's racist. She does call other people racist though. But, yeah. Please, somebody else read it. Everybody who sees it, read it. And if this got a movie, Amber Heard should definitely play Swanee. Now, in closing, I just wanted to give a suggestion of what could have been with this amazing setup for a story that's here that did not get taken advantage of. Because there is a very rich background here that I just don't think got fully explored, and instead we ended up with travelogues with awkward sexual tension between things, and every book disconnected from the last. So you don't have a continuing plot line, and your character is undriven, and then you just have like a lot of weird meandering where you're like, why are we here? Especially when these books are like thick, why are we reading this? Instead of this massive story of ignoring the evils and atrocities of Augustin because Swanee is blind to it all, imagine if Swanee went back in time because she wanted to better understand why her people were broken up and the tension between the Teutons and the Saxons, and why her father hid all of this stuff from her and didn't want to be part of the Teuton society. Imagine that she went back thinking that the Teutons were oppressed people that the Saxons just wanted to wipe out for one reason or another, like they were racist or whatever, something shallow. But she lands back in time and she learns that her lineage is entirely powered by a demonic contract, human sacrifices, and sex magic. More, the Saxons wanted to defeat the Teutons not only because they were demonic people, but because the Teutons kept taking their people for those human sacrifices. Obviously, you're going to want to get on the offense for that. This becomes the story of Swanee's villain origin story, where she not only sympathizes more with her bloodline, but she wants those powers for herself. She wants to protect them, and she wants to make sure that the Teutons survive into modern day. She hates that her father has rejected the power while she embraces them. She totally understands why the Saxons wiped out her people, but she's like, you know what? I don't freaking care. The Teutons are my people, and I want that power, and I want us to rule. Her bloodlust and willingness to be Augustin's accomplice would then feed her preparation for the Lady of Munich position, because she's shown her allegiance to Wotan and her people, feeding others to the city just to consume more power. This would totally justify her recklessness, dismissal of murder, and all of those rape experiences that she experienced or had seen it happen, and it's a necessary feature to retain power and authority as a Teuton. It's also very creepy. It also would just be like, oh, this is really dark. It also makes sense because you're dealing with demons over here. Adding to all of that drama, her bringing Joel back in time, he's turned into a Teuton, and after experiencing all of this and seeing the truth behind her lineage, he would reject becoming part of any of it, especially after the blood sacrifice and the transfer that turned him into one of them. Then, in returning to the modern era, he becomes a Saxon leader that battles against Augustin and Swanee and Hans, knowing the background of their people, as they continue their pilgrimage in the modern era to bring back the rule of Teutons in Germany and to take power. Imagine the angst as Joel reflects on the part that he played in creating children in the past who willfully carried on the lineage, tradition, and demonic contract for conquering, especially if him going back in time with Swanee and having kids with children actually gave a foothold for the Teuton power to continue stronger into the future that they have now. Then Swanee's resentment of Joel would make so much more sense because he's rejected her clan, her tribe, and the power that she cares about. Joel would also feel worse because he's left his children in the hands of demon worshippers instead of trying to fight them away from the path he didn't want them to go on. The true fight between Augustin, Hans, Swanee, and Joel would then come after they get back from the past, and Joel is like, wow, okay, that was a thing, but I'm glad it's over. And Swanee, I don't think that we should mess with this stuff. It's evil. And then Swanee takes that personally because she is a devotee to Wooten. She's going to go for the power. She wants the power and control, and it's her entire identity. Joel returns to the U.S., where eventually he notices that Swanee is cold to him, and now Beth is pulling away from him and doing the same thing. He sees things going on in Germany with Swanee and Beth that remind him too much of the evils he saw in medieval Germany. The goal for Swanee then is for her and the Keyholder to impose Teutonic rule over Germany again via regrouping and getting their revenge on the Saxons that forced them into hiding for hundreds of years. This becomes the ultimate battle between the Teutons and the Saxons in the modern era, and Joel has to fight against his ex-girlfriend and his ex-wife, technically, in the modern era to keep this evil from taking over. And that could have been such an incredible story. All of the bits were there. It's just Swanee had to be made the heroine, and she came off evil the whole time. Again, I need other people to read this and then to let me know your interpretation of this. And if you enjoy it as Swanee is an evil person, that would still help me out to know how you are interpreting this, or if you see Swanee as a heroine or a tragic heroine, and Joel deserved to be shit on the whole time. Let me know that too, because I actually need a lot. I want people to talk to me about the weird sexual stuff throughout this, to be like, guys, grooming is all throughout this, and it is never addressed. And these are supposed to be the good guys, and we are supposed to be like, yay, Swanee. And she is writing, like, she wanted to bang her son, and then she just wrote graphic sex scenes and something specifically for him to look at. It was a journey, okay? This is the end of the video. This was a journey of a year and a half, because these books were releasing every 3 months since the beginning of last year, and finished this spring. And the next series in this universe is coming out in November. And if you need some spoilers, it is well, Blood Quantum, German Blood Quantum, Blood Purity Magic, Germany. What's your guess? Yeah, it's set in the 1940s, so that's the next one to look forward to. If you're interested in this book or this universe, please check it out. Links down in the description below. I need a support group for this. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Looking forward to your comments. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer.
For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die.
Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that?
To the left, plain black letters read along the wall, "You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right." My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me.
Where the hell am I?
You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?